So my relationship with Paul is not primarily based on the Air Force days. It's not based on the post-marriage days after he met Tony, although we stayed friends certainly for all those years. I am the guy that was friends with Paul during the bachelor days. So this, I'm going to be talking about Paul's human side, not his divinity here. So he was indeed, as John said, he was indeed human, and he was. We came together. We moved to Boston about the same time in 1989, 1990. I was an emergency doc, and he was a pilot, so we had goofy schedules, and we had a lot of time off during the week. We met at the Paula Center. And we just got to spend a lot of time together. We ran around the Charles a lot together, and that was our guide time to talk about stuff. And many things that impressed me about Paul have already been said. Not the least of which is his confidence was extraordinary. I wish you could bottle that and sell it. His confidence was terrific. But he also, his faith was so important, and he could confidently express his faith. And that was impressive. It makes an impression for somebody. And people can tell you about faith things. They can fill your head with theology, and it may not stick. But when somebody talks to you and it comes from their gut or their heart, and they really believe it, it makes a difference. And so he and I, we used to arm wrestle about some of this stuff. We didn't agree on everything, but we were for the most part in the same place. So we would do that quite a bit. So. I was just impressed with that, but to back up his confidence in both his own abilities and his faith, he was extremely generous. And just a couple of examples, a trivial example and then something more profound. I took flying lessons once upon a time, and when I started, I was having trouble. I was I was getting sick and air sick and these sorts of things. And I told him these stories. I said, Paul, I don't think I can do this. And he said, you know what? I can't tell you how many times I threw up into my helmet. So he was very, during his pilot training days, and he was very, very empathetic and would reach out right away. So he got me through that in some ways, and that was really, really sweet. And somewhere I have a picture, after I passed my test and got the private pilot's license, there's a picture of me and him and a couple other people out at a restaurant near Fenway, and somebody is pinning these little wings on me, these goofy little wings, and Paul is saluting me. I mean, it's just really a sweet measure of support from him. Paul started, I think it was mentioned that Paul started a men's group, and that was pretty novel at the time, early 90s, to pull a men's group together, and I was fortunate enough to be in that group. And there was one particular guy in the group that he ran into some personal difficulties, and Paul, I don't know how to, I don't want to wade into controversy. Paul, in some ways, was a little judgmental about the lifestyle that this particular guy was living, but at the same time, at the exact same time, Paul, this guy this particular man was hit some hard times financially. So Paul was the only one in the group that went out of his way to collect money and to pay for this man, to get him through the rough times. So he would knock you down and he would turn around and he would hug you at the same time. And that was so impressive to me that he would do that. The rest of us, I can only speak for myself. We're really impressed with that. There was I don't know who Aunt Ruth was. I'm sure Tony does, and Tony and Paul and Julia Matthew would know her, but Paul was supporting her. Evidently she needed money. Paul was supporting her, so extremely generous. So with all that confidence and the confidence in his faith, he was actually living a life of real generosity beyond what I think most people would expect generous to be. I remember just after he died, Scott Wally wanted to write a book. I don't know if he's here tonight, but he wanted to write a book about Paul. Like so many people here, he was impressed with Paul to the point where this was an extraordinary man. So he was talking to me, and I said, he said he really wants to write this book, and I said, well, contribute the chapter on the bachelor days, and he said, Tim, without that, there is no book. So, I mean, from these thundering Halloween parties where I didn't think that the 5th floor or the 6th floor of that place on Dartmouth Street could hold so many people, to exploring New England, camping up in Maine. I mean, we had it was just really good special time together. And I remember him telling me once before he met Tanya, this is true, he said, I feel like it's coming. I said, what, Paul? He said, I feel like I'm going to meet her soon. And he met her shortly afterwards. That's actually a true story. It might have been 6 months, but it was not 3 years. No, he really said that. And I guess one last anecdote for those. I mean, I don't know if Julia, Michael, or Matthew heard this story, because last time I told it was at their wedding. This is just part of the folklore of living in Boston at the time. We all had cars, and the hardest thing in the world is to find parking. So those of you who've heard it before, bear with me. And those of you who haven't heard it before, it's worth remembering. So Paul's confidence was, as I mentioned, was really influential and really effective, but he couldn't win every battle. So it turns out that he ran up, he was looking for a place to park his car, and he got sick of, like all of us, sick of hunting around and driving and looking for parking spots or getting up at 6 a.m. to move it before the street cleaners come in and so forth. So he actually got a gallon of paint and painted his own parking spot on Dartmouth Street in the Back Bay and said private parking. That kind of chutzpah I've never seen before. And I do have to say that, yeah, he was human. The Boston parking clerk would have none of it, and came out and painted gray over his white, and that was the end of that. That was the story. I've never heard of that. That was just great. That's who he was. So the fact that I'm here in a room 15 years after his death, and there's 100 people here, is a testimony to his spirit. And I still feel it to this day that his presence, the confidence in his faith, is such a legacy, and I'm grateful for it. So that's
Thank you all, and that's it. So thank you. Just so grateful. Yeah, Julia.
I also want to say, guys, thank you guys so much, everyone, for being here. We just so appreciate you guys coming out and taking the time. And one thing I definitely really want to say is that, I mean, I was 10, Mike 7, Matt was 3 when my dad passed. A lot of you guys, in many ways, like, knew him for much longer than we ever did. And so there's never gonna, I definitely still feel like his presence for sure, and I know that he's like, oh, talk to us and everything, but those of you guys who have known him for a long time, or even if you never knew him, like I've had some people come up who've never met him before, and they're like, I feel like I have a relationship with your dad, spiritually, which is really cool. But if any, like, there's never ever gonna be a time where you're like, people are like, oh, you know, I don't want to take too much of your time, but I have this like really cool story. Like I met this guy 2 days ago, and he was like my dad's lifting buddy. I'm like, oh, like, that's another aspect of my dad that I wouldn't know otherwise. And so there's never ever gonna be a time that any of us are ever gonna feel like put out or anything. So if you ever want to share, go crazy. We would love to hear it. And we have like so many cool emails and letters and voicemails and everything that people over the years have just sent in. So if you ever feel inspired to do so, go crazy. And thank you so much for all being here.